Welcome back to another episode of the Dear Higher Self podcast, bringing to you first of many solo episodes. You've got your host here, Gina, and today we are going to talk about relationships and how they are mirrors and contracts. I've spent a good amount of time studying this work, more particularly the work of Carl Jung, and how he talks about how what is going on inside is a reflection for what you're going to see in your outside world. So whatever is coming up within you is what you are going to see in your reality around you. And I think a lot of how that ties into life is the relationships that we have with people, whether they're platonic relationships, family relationships, romantic relationships. Everyone you come into contact with in your lifetime, in any age, is here to teach you something about yourself, about where you can grow and how you can expand in life. And I've had some pretty significant relationships so far along my journey, and I feel like I've learned so much from those. And so I want to get a little personal with you in this episode and share some stories about my life and some of the relationships that I've had that I have grown and expanded, learned lessons from. I feel like with a lot of relationships and how you go through those with people, while you're in it, you don't really see the lesson for what it is yet, whether it's good or bad, and that is arbitrary, right? Because I feel like even if you assign it good or bad, there's a good in it. There's a reason why it's happening. It's there to teach you something, but it's hard to see what it is and why it's happening for you while you're inside of it. But when you're in hindsight and it's a little bit more in the past of what you experienced, you can see it from more of a bird's eye view and process it for what it was and what it was there to teach you. And when I think back on my journey and the relationships that I've had, the most notable one to date is a dear friend that I've had since I was in middle school. So growing up for me, I had a lot of problems with friends growing up in my younger years. My elementary school years all the way up through 7th grade for me was pretty darn similar to the movie Mean Girls. It was a traumatic experience to say the least. And I switched schools when I was in 8th grade, went to a different school because of this reason, because of those darn mean girls. And I met this friend that I have been really good friends with since we were in 8th grade. And that relationship for me has been such an expander and such a teacher for me in my journey. And it continues to be that friendship that started when we were, how old are you when you're in 8th grade? My goodness, 13, 14? Right around when you're starting to be a teenager, which thank goodness, right? Because navigating life and being a teenager is hard enough, but to have that friendship come in when you're starting to go through those awkward teenager years was so vital to have her in my life, because really she was my first true friend that was kind and showed love the way that a friendship should be. She showed me she showed me so many things, and we're going to get into it, but she showed me what a friendship should be, and she was a good friend to me, and I really needed that, really needed that at the time. And not only did she teach me how to be a good friend and how to have a friend that shows up for you and what that can look like, but we had such different upbringings growing up. And it's interesting, if you follow astrology, I'm a Capricorn Pisces rising, and she was a Pisces Capricorn rising. So we were like the perfect mirrors for each other, opposites, but similar enough. I feel like the Venn diagram was pretty spot on for her and I, and how we were similar and yet different. And my upbringing compared to hers was vastly different. So I grew up in a very large East Coast Italian family. I was born on the West Coast, but most of my family comes from Queens, New York. They are as Italian as they come, ran as a pack of 12, 13 people at all times. We lived in the same condo complex growing up. So my great-grandma lived two doors down from my grandma, who lived 3 doors down from my uncle. My aunt at one point lived across the way. We were in the front. We took over the pool on the weekends. We were a very close-knit Italian family. And I mean, you know how East Coasters are, right? How Italians are. I grew up in a female-dominant family where the women were just tenacious, headstrong women. And, you know, the stereotype with Italians and East Coasters, everyone was very to the point, straightforward, blunt, a little hot-headed, a little stubborn. And now I love my family. So many good memories with them. But there was a frequency, an energy to my family that was vastly, vastly different than my friend who lived a much softer life. So I remember going to her house and it was just a different vibe, different style. They ate different food. Like we were always having pasta and pork chops and sausage and peppers, and I mean even our vegetables it was usually like canned vegetables, but I would go over to her house and her mom would make this like fresh vegetable quiche thing. We would have smoothies. There were organic snacks in the house, and over at my house we were having, you know, Dr. Pepper and Oreos and chips, and it was a different vibe. And for me, you know, I took on a lot of that personality because that was what was modeled to me. I kind of had this tenacious personality myself that was, you know, direct and sassy, and that was just what was modeled to me. But then in hanging out with my friend and growing up and spending time with her, she was able to show me a different side of how to navigate life. Being a Pisces was a little more emotional and softer and feminine, and femininity is totally different with my East Coast Italian family. Like we're women in our masculine. So to see femininity in a different way, to see emotions in a different way, and my family, you know, you said how you felt and it was kind of brash and in your face and direct, whereas it wasn't as grounded and thought through and deep. It was surface level and it is what it is kind of attitude. And so being an empath growing up and being really sensitive, I was modeling this kind of East Coast Italian energy, but I had a lot of deep Pisces rising kind of emotions and feelings, and being an empath and sensitive and very intuitive, I didn't really have that modeling to know how to navigate that. So to have a friend at that age show me what it was like to think deeper and to process feelings with. And we always just had really deep conversations. And that wasn't something up until any point in my life at that stage could I do with anybody else, was be able to have these heady, deep conversations. And now knowing myself as deeply as I do, I'm a very deep person. I mean, it's the Pisces rising in me. I have, you know, a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts going on up in my head. And she was really the reason why I was able to start to see a different flavor, so to speak, of how to navigate that, because it wasn't something I was ever going to get taught at home. And so going back to the whole relationships being mirrors or soul contracts, she was able to show me a different side, a different flavor of life that I wasn't going to get from the teachers that were in my family system. So to have someone who can show me a different way to be, to act, to feel, it was so crucial to the trajectory of my life, having her as a friend, because I really needed that for me to be able to understand who I was and to process a lot of what I was going through. And so I deeply, deeply feel that this friendship that I've had for now 20-ish years was a soul contract, because she has been an integral part of me understanding who I am, who I'm supposed to be, and to kind of grow out of and heal from a lot of the things that I experienced as a kid. And so I'm sure you can imagine, if you were on your healing journey, you know, growing up in an environment that's like East Coast Italian, there's some drama to be had with that. It was very tough love. I remember just the way that we showed love a lot of the times was through tough love, through banter, through giving somebody shit. And that was just it was an endearing way to show love in the family. And for the longest time, I thought that I liked it. And when I was dating in my younger years and in my 20s, I would always say, I need somebody who I can banter with. Like I need to be able to give you a hard time and we can go back and forth. Like that's just how I am. I always love that statement. That's just how I am. I really thought that it was something that I liked. And once I started going down my healing journey and unpacking a lot of things and healing from a lot of things from my upbringing, I actually realized how traumatic a lot of that was, that it seemed so innocent at the time, but I think it caused a lot of damage that I didn't realize that it was causing. And, in picking partners through, my late teens and in my 20s, it was something that I looked for, not because it was something that I really actually liked. It was just what I knew and how I knew love to be shown. I also think that, not to say anything poor about my family, because like I said, there's so many beautiful memories that I wouldn't trade for the world. But, there were some things that were traumatic, and I think it was a different time back then. We're a little more sensitive as a culture, and so I'm sure it would be different now. But there's a lot to grow out of from what was modeled to me versus the kind of life that ultimately resonated best for who I was, who I am, and the kind of life that I really wanted to live and who I needed to become to get there. So that relationship has been integral and so important to me. So that friendship I think about all the time, and how I wouldn't be who I am today had I not had her as a friendship. If it wasn't for that friendship at that time, I would not be who I am today without having had her in my life to just change that trajectory just a little bit at that time, which allowed me to become who I am today. I would have not gotten there otherwise. And so I appreciate that soul contract with her so much, because she has been such a teacher for me for so many years. It's been a real blessing. And separate from that relationship, a theme in my life has been romantic relationships, and they have been real mirrors and teachers for me throughout my life. And now I really just believe, now that I've done a lot of this spirituality work, this healing work and whatnot, I always judged myself for having had so many serial monogamous relationships. I often, through my 20s, had relationships that lasted, a year, 2 years, kind of repeatedly. And I just genuinely feel like in this lifetime, that is just how I have chosen to learn lessons and receive growth, is through relationships and people in my life, which is why I decided to start off with this episode. Because if I really think back to what is a major theme that I've experienced in my life, it is relationships. I've had a lot of people come and go and stay, and they've left lasting marks on me and the journey and the stories that I would tell. And so I feel like it was important to start with this as the first solo episode, because it's been such an integral part of my journey. And, being a Capricorn and being very ambitious and really into self-growth my whole life, I grow quickly, and I've found that in my 20s I have expanded, outgrown people pretty quickly. And so now, because I'm out of it, because you can't really assess until it's in hindsight, so now that it's in hindsight, when I think back to it and kind of look at it for what it is, I think with those romantic relationships that I was having, I was outgrowing at least most of them quickly, and that's why that was happening. With romantic relationships, either you grow together or one will outgrow the other, and you'll go in different directions, and that's a lot of what was happening. And so now when we kind of think back to the mirror piece of it and how relationships can be mirrors, I can speak to of my romantic relationships that I had in my 20s that were really similar, and they were an interesting mirror in how this one relationship that was, for lack of a better term, pretty toxic, not healthy, not a good choice in partner at all. And wow, really getting deep here and vulnerable. I knew I was going to share these stories, but now that it's coming up, I'm feeling the resistance. Welcome to the vulnerability, everyone. Okay, now with this relationship, there's a lot of infidelity that happened. That was the first time I had experienced that in my 20s, and it was my early 20s, and it was so hard for me. And I didn't have the tools then in my early 20s that I have now, and I wasn't able to process that relationship like I would process it if it happened now. And because I didn't process it well at the time, I kind of probably just shoved it down and didn't really know what to do with a lot of what I was feeling and navigating, and kind of just moved on. And a partner or so later, what came into my life was somebody who very much embodied the same energy, the same charisma. I remember growing up and my cousin telling me the boys that are the most charismatic are the ones that you should watch out for. And I remember not taking her seriously. Being a loving Disney movies growing up. It's like, no, charisma's good. I like charisma. No, she was right. She was very right. If she's listening to this, you were right. Yeah, it was all the charisma, said all the right things, did all the right things, just had this energy that just drew you in. And it was so familiar to me that, as he was pursuing me before we dated, I actually said to him, no, I've dated you before and I already know how this ends. Said it out loud. I knew. My intuition knew. It was like, oh, we've seen this. We've watched this movie. We've seen it play out. We don't want to go here. And again, because I didn't process and heal from that first one when I experienced it, what came back through was another mirror, another lesson that I needed to learn because I didn't really learn it the first time. And I think that that's okay. For a while, I judged myself. I judged myself because it was like, oh my gosh, I knew better. I knew better than to do that. By the way, yes, we dated and then it ended up being the same. It was the same result. Should probably let you know how that one ended. If you couldn't have guessed, yes, it also ended the exact same way in which I knew it was going to end. And so I was really hard on myself for a while because I was like, oh my God, I knew it. Why didn't I listen? And I had a hard time trusting myself at that point because I knew better, but I did it anyway. And I didn't understand it at the time. But now with all the studying that I've done and knowing psychology and all the things, I wasn't done with the lesson. I didn't learn the lesson. I didn't grow and expand from it. I wasn't done with that. I still found those traits to be attractive. And so it had to come back in. It was going to come back in because the alchemy for what that was, for what that lesson needed to be, didn't transpire. And so had I not decided to learn from it at that point, I probably would have kept attracting that over and over again until my soul decided that it was done with that lesson and expanded beyond it. So now I don't judge myself for that, but it's very interesting to me now looking back, because in hindsight it's so much clearer, that it needed to happen again. And in any situation where you experience something and you don't fully expand and learn from what it was there to teach you, you're going to keep attracting those relationships, whether they're romantic or platonic or with a coworker at work. It's just going to keep happening until you learn what the gift is there for you to learn from it. And so that was a true soul contract and a mirror, I believe, both times, to expand and to grow. I think that it's always good. It's always there to teach you something. It's there to expand you. And so whatever that is, it's only going to help me get to where I ultimately want to go. It's a good thing. It's a good thing even if it's a bad thing. So we have these relationships that come into our lives, but they come into our lives for a reason. They are teachers and we attract them on purpose. Everyone carries an energetic frequency, and it's why you meet some people and you feel absolutely nothing toward them, whether it's romantic or platonic or you're at a networking event, whatever it may be. I've met plenty of people who are into really similar things that I am, but yet I feel no draw to them to want to be friends with them, or, in the past maybe have dated somebody. It's really interesting to be like, wow, we have a lot in common, but I feel absolutely nothing going on here. Like, I'm good. But then you meet other people and you're like, oh my gosh, we have to be best friends. Or like, I don't know what it is about this person, but I'm so into them. There's underneath it this frequency, this energy, that there's an attraction there, whether it be platonic or romantic, and it's there for a reason. And I find this really interesting because if you've ever read the book, How to Get the Love You Want, fabulous, fabulous book, but they talk a lot about how you subconsciously and unknowingly attract people who are similar to your caretakers growing up. So your parents or whoever had a strong hand in your upbringing. And so they say that it's unconscious It's not like at any point you ever meet somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, you remind me exactly of my mother or my dad or, whoever, and like we should date. That's just never what you ever say, especially if there's some lessons and some toxicity and healing that needs to be done around those relationships. It's literally the last thing that you're looking for, right? Especially when you're looking for a romantic partner. You're not like, who is going to give me the same trauma that I had? Oh, you? Great. Where do I sign? Let's do this. Like, no, it's not ever the agenda. Yet somehow we have these relationships and we feel connections with these people. And then you realize how similar they are, how, to what you grew up with or what you experienced growing up. And so you're just looking for that because that's what feels good to you and feels normal to you. So you're just hardwired to want to find somebody who energetically speaks that same subconscious language that you are programmed with. So I can look at my friendships, I can look at my romantic relationships from the past, or even now, and see how those all correlate back to my caretakers and just what I knew from my early first handful of years when you're a sponge and you're essentially writing a blank hard drive. That's what you naturally go and look for. I think that if you dial this back to soul contracts, which we've talked about in an earlier episode, you come into this lifetime as a soul in a body to experience certain themes, to learn certain lessons. And in order to do that, you need to experience certain peoples and certain situations to be able to live out what it is that your soul is looking to expand in. And so prior to coming here, you have these soul contracts with certain people. They come into your life to show you those lessons that you need to learn. So whether you want to call them good or label them as bad, again, my feelings on that, they're all here for a purpose. So I feel like even if it's somebody that comes in just for a season of your life, or somebody who lasts the whole lifetime, or just comes in for not even a season, but just, that person that cut you off in traffic, or that person that's in front of you in line at the store who was really rude or even really kind. Everybody's a teacher. It's all a mirror for what you're going through in life. And I just think that that's really cool to think about. And I think that when you approach life from that place, like, okay, you are a mirror. What are you here? Or you are a mirror or you are a soul contract. What are you here to teach me? What am I here to teach you? And how can we play that out? It just feels so much easier to live life that way than it is to think about this person hurt me and that they did that to me, and kind of having this victim mindset about what it is that you've navigated. Or not even just a victim mindset. It could also be that you're not giving the gratitude to the relationships that mean so much to you in your life, right? So you could have these incredible people who have changed the trajectory of your life, like my friend from middle school that I've been friends with for so long. Like, I have made it clear to her how much of an impact she has made in my life. Like, I don't take it for granted. I see that relationship for what it is, and I've told her many times how special she is to me because of the role that she has played in my life. And so I think there's two pieces to learn from this. Is one, are you appreciating those truly positive and impactful relationships in your life, realizing them, and then going as far as to express your gratitude and letting somebody know the impact that they've made in your life? Or two, are you living kind of from that victim mindset with certain relationships where you're still kind of placing blame and seeing it from a woe is me situation, instead of being able to approach it from this place of, this was here to serve me and I'm thankful for it. And let me be the first to tell you, it doesn't start off that way. While you're in the thick of it, while you're in the healing, it's fine to be there. You be there as long as you need to be there, because that's part of it. You've got to feel all the things and navigate the situation by hitting your head against all the walls and really just feeling it and seeing it and peeling back the layers for what it is. But eventually, as you're doing the healing work, you get to a point where you can look at it and go, you know what? That was actually a really beneficial thing for me, because I'm a different person because of it, or it taught me this and it now led me to this thing. It's all for a reason. And so I feel like that's one of the best indicators of knowing when you've truly healed from something, when you've done the work enough to where you can change the narrative about how you tell that story. So I'll give you another example. There's another, for sure, soul contract romantic relationship that I had in my life. It was my relationship before my current one. The ultimate soul contract. Oh my gosh, you guys. And I will tell you that for a very long chunk of time, I had nothing nice to say about this person and how they traumatized me. But through telling that narrative from that place, I was doing a lot of the healing work around it, of trying to figure out why it happened, what I needed to learn from it. And eventually, I noticed that I started telling the story from a different place. So now I'll tell you that story from a different place so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, because this relationship with this person was the ultimate toxic relationship. And let me just pause and preface now that I'm only realizing that I'm only highlighting the really toxic ones. They weren't all that way. I had some healthy romantic relationships, you guys. They just didn't work out. But the ones that are the most, turbulent and toxic, those are the bigger teachers, right? Those were, I would say, less forgettable, right? There were the other ones that were just okay, they just didn't work out, and it was fine. It just is what it is. Those didn't pack as much of a punch in terms of life lessons and growth opportunities for me as the ones that were toxic and traumatic and required a lot of healing. But that's why they're there, right? That's why we go through these things. That's the whole point of this episode, and that they're teachers. So that's why I'm bringing those up. So let's get that clear. I didn't totally just have toxic relationships. All right, anyway, so this one was very traumatic. But again, it didn't start that way, right? They never do. It started great, and at no point did I ever think you remind me of, in this case, he was a mirror for the relationship that I had had with my mother, but at no point was I like, wow, you're just like my mom, we should date. Absolutely not. That knowing was not made clear until way later. So things start out great until they weren't. But right up until that point, I was on my healing journey at this point, and I was finally at a place where I was ready to do the healing work around the relationship with my mother. So done a lot of work around that because of this relationship, which we're going to get to that part in the story. So now, things are really great between my mom and I. We were very close growing up. She was a single mom. It was just her and I growing up all my life. And so because of that, it was just bittersweet just being the two of us, right? There were good things and there were bad things. And so there was a lot of anger and trauma that had developed over the years between her and I. And it was something that I think because she was the closest relationship that I had had growing up, I just wasn't ready to touch it for a while. I was like, I would go to therapy for any other situation, any other relationship that was fine. But when it came to my mom, I just wasn't ready to go there until right around when I was dating this person. I was deep kind of into the spirituality work and my healing journey, and it felt like the right time. And I remember I got this book that resonated with kind of what I had been navigating in this relationship with my mom, and just remember making the decision that, like, okay, I am going to start doing this work. I'm going to heal the mother wound. And I remember telling him at the time, look, I'm about to, really dive into this and open this box. And when I open this box, I have no idea what's going to come out. Like, I'm scared, but I also know that I need to do this. And I'm nervous for how that might affect our relationship. So I kind of had a feeling that doing this work was gonna stir up some things. And it's funny because I feel like this relationship came net, I believe that it was a soul contract, that this particular relationship came into my life at this time because it was right at the time that I was gonna start diving into healing this major theme in my life. And he was the one that needed to be there to teach me that lesson. And that's why net, I believe that we got together. And so as I'm doing this healing work, the relationship between us is unfolding, and it just starts getting really toxic and kind of scary. It got to the point where I was kind of just scared to be alone in the house with him, and it ended up being very emotionally abusive, which was something I had never experienced in my life before. And life became a really scary place. So it's interesting because that area of my life had turned into what it was turning into, I actually put the mom healing thing on the shelf because this was taking up all my attention, and it was kind of scary. It was scary, and I had to deal with that. And in the midst of dealing with that and trying to do the healing work around that, because I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not about this. I don't want this kind of relationship. I have no idea what happened. This was like, there's a Jekyll and Hyde situation going on around here. And I know that this is new for me. And I know how I am in a relationship, and I've never seen this transpire before, so I'm very confused, and I'm very committed to doing whatever work I need to do to like make this situation go away or understand why it's here. But like, I was doing my best to come at it from a very grounded and mature place. But one of the lessons that I had to learn through all of this was that people can only meet you where they're at, and sometimes people can't meet you at the level that you're at, no matter how hard you try. So I had to just accept that for what it was, that I couldn't be met at the level that I was operating at with all the knowledge that I had with psychology and healing, and I was ready to heal. I was ready to do the healing and the learning and the growth from it, but he wasn't at the time. And so we were just stuck in the mud for a little bit, and I had to make a really hard decision. But anyway, through the work of doing a lot of therapy and figuring out how that relationship needed to be navigated, I learned a lot about, this is actually when the book How to Get the Love You Want was introduced to me, and imago therapy, and I took it very seriously. I came up with an exercise, actually I think we talked about this in an earlier episode, where you kind of map out your partner and the traits about them and kind of map it back to your caregivers. And so I had done this with him and some of the other relationships that I had in my life and how they all map back to my caregivers. And when I was done doing the whole map, it was very, very clear that he was a mirror for the relationship that I had had with my mom. And it's kind of ironic because this was right around the time that I was like, let's heal the mother wound. But like I said, at this time I was taking, my healing journey and my self-growth journey very, very seriously, and was willing to do the hard work to learn whatever lesson this was here to teach me. And it ended up, through this relationship and navigating what I navigated with him, it was actually simultaneously allowing me to heal the relationship with my mom, because they were such close parallels. And so actually, let me back up, because I feel like it had to be that way. Because I think if I had tried to heal it directly just between my mom and I, it wouldn't have unfolded in the way that it needed to. Whereas in this relationship, that was more of a fresh dynamic and just a more, I guess, close relationship in my romantic relationship with this person. And I think my commitment to it and just how deep I was into it, I think that allowed me to really fully go there. Whereas I don't think I could have fully gone to that depth if it was between her and I. So it was like, I feel like now in hindsight, when I look at it, I see that it had to be through this romantic relationship that it was mirrored back to me for me to do the work to the degree that I needed to heal and process. So not only was I processing what was going on between him and I, but because I was able to see the through line and the parallels between her and I was kind of, like I said, guys, I was very committed to doing the work. So I was kind of working them in parallel of, figuring out what I needed to do in this romantic relationship, but then also figuring out like kind of what it was here to teach me and how that was mirroring the trauma that I had experienced between her and I growing up. And obviously I very much needed to walk away from that relationship, and I did. But when I did, because I had done all that healing work, it actually really healed the relationship with my mom and I after that. Because like I said, I was kind of working them in parallel because they were so similar. And now my mom and I have a really great relationship compared to what it was at before. Like, it's not perfect. I don't think any relationship with your parent is ever going to be perfect, but it is like night and day different. And so this particular relationship, while he gets zero credit, I get the credit for doing the work, but it was really important so I could have that relationship back with my mom. And like since then, we've created so many incredible memories and kind of re-bonded in a way that I know both of us really wanted to have a relationship, but we just couldn't because we had so much stuff between us to get over, that now we're able to have that. But I wouldn't have had that if I didn't go through this absolutely traumatic relationship that I went through. So as much as it was one of the darkest periods of my life, it ended up being the greatest experience of my life because not only did it give me the relationship back with my mom to where we can have a healthy relationship with healthy boundaries and honesty, it also taught me to trust my intuition. There was a lot of situations where my intuition was telling me things throughout that relationship that I wasn't listening to. So I wouldn't be here today recording this podcast, having this business where I teach other women how to follow their intuition and how to step into their power. That never would have happened if it wasn't for that rock bottom of a season in my life. I had to go through that for it to just rattle me to choose a different channel, to live a different way, to step into my power, to step into who I am, to have a better relationship with my mom. I needed to experience that in order to be where I am today. And I know if my older self, who was the version of me that was going through that, if she could hear this now, she'd be like, I don't know if I can believe this because it's that bad. It's that bad. But I'm sure she'd be very thankful to know how it ended up turning out. But I know she was in a place where she never could have saw it from this angle because it was dark, you guys. It was really, really hard. And for the longest time, I wasn't able to speak about it from this place. But I know now that I've done enough of the healing work that the story that I can tell you today is this version, and that I can see it from a place of how it served me. And so, net, these relationships that we have in our life are mirrors. They are soul contracts. They are here to help us step into our true authentic self, to step into our power, to expand into versions of ourselves that we desire to become, that we're here to step, we're here in this lifetime to experience. There's so many different experiences that are here, and there's so many different ways that you could experience the themes that you're here to learn, and the people that we meet along the way, who are the mirrors and the soul contracts for us, are such, human guides on our journey. And I just think that that's really cool. So whether it's somebody who provides us a really pleasant experience of expansion, or if it's somebody who shows us where the depths of our shadows lie, they are an integral part of our journey. And I think that's really cool. I think that's one of the really cool experiences about being here as a soul in a body and going on this journey called life. So if there's anything that you take from this episode as we wrap up here, is I hope that if there's anyone in your life, when you sit and think about these relationships, they've changed the trajectory of your life because of maybe just them being them and just showing you a different flavor to life, or something that they've taught you, any way that they've expanded you, let them know. I love letting the people in my life know the changes that they've inflicted upon me just by being them. I think it gives people permission to be themselves more, or to continue showing love and knowing what an impact that they've made. I think it would make their day. So think about those relationships and see who's made an impact of your life and let them know. And two, if there are any relationships that you think back upon that you still kind of see with a little bit of animosity, a little bit of anger, and if that person, they did this to me, it's not like I'm going to advise you to have them back into your life, but I'd like to invite you to look at that situation and pick it apart a little bit and see if you could find the lesson in it, because it doesn't need to change what happened. What happened. It was, whatever it is to you is real. But when you can see it, that it happened for you and not to you, that's how you know that you've come at it from a more healed place. So I will leave you with that. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you enjoyed this one, let us know in the comments. We've got the community over at dearhigherself.me. So if this one resonated in any way for you, let us know over in the community over there. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please do. It means the world to us. And we will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.